Hi friends, Alysa here. Before we get started today, I just wanted to let you know that today's episode will discuss a plot point in the TV series Veronica Mars, which includes a rape. There will be no specific details. There will be not diving any deeper to that, but it will be mentioned several times throughout the episode, and I just wanted you to be prepared. So do what you need to do. Protect yourself, friends. Let's go ahead and listen to the episode. You're listening to Best Forevers, a podcast for kindred spirits. A podcast that encourages you to love more on your friends and to further consider the issues that plague friendships. I'm Alysa Lucas, and I'm a marshmallow. I've been a fan of the snarky and smart series Veronica Mars since the dawn of time, as I like to say. And I'm so excited for the season 4 release on Hulu at the end of this month. So I'm dedicating all of July to Veronica Mars, marshmallows, and friendships. So each episode this month will focus on one season, with the final episode focusing on the 2014 movie. Then there will be quick bonus episodes with friends to talk about each episode of season 4. I'm so excited. And I'm so excited today to welcome my friend, colleague, and fellow marshmallow, Dr. Lesley Withers.
Hello.
There she is. Yay.
I'm really excited to be here.
I'm so glad to have you here because when I think of Veronica Mars, you're one of the first people I think of. So
Because we went to the movie together.
We went to the movie together.
And we wore our Team Logan t-shirts.
Oh gosh, Team Logan forever. And there'll be all sorts of quizzes and things like that online, so everyone can let us know if you're Team Logan, Team Piz,
No.
Team Leo, Team Troy. Didn't see a lot of those shirts.
No. I did like the Team Dick shirts, though.
Yeah.
Those were pretty fun.
Those are fun, but it's like, come on.
A little naughty.
A little naughty, but so I started at Central Michigan University in 2013, and the movie came out in 2014, so I feel like it was one of our first adventures together, if you will, as friends and colleagues, and we drove across the state. I had a bag of marshmallows. We had our Team Logan shirts, and we went to go see it with my friend Tierney, who is, I believe, Team Leo.
Wow.
I'm gonna call you out, Tierney.
I'd forgotten that part.
I might have to get her on the phone to talk about why she is so that I can...
Although Leo makes far more sense than Piz.
Yes. I do like... Okay, here's the thing. I like Leo. I love the actor who plays Leo because he also plays Schmidt on New Girl, and I love him. But no, not in this world of things. It's
Exactly.
Logan.
It's got to be Logan.
It's got to be Logan. Thank you.
And it's not Duncan either.
Oh, God. There wasn't even any Team Duncan shirts that I remember.
Nope. And
Awkward.
you'd think, because at least in the first season, there were folks who thought that she ought to be with him.
Ugh.
Especially given the cliffhanger that they used to end the season.
Oh, which is a great cliffhanger. But we haven't got to the beginning. We're already talking about
I know. Talking about jumping ahead.
So, but I also, when I think of Veronica Mars, I know that I knew that we were going to be able to go to the movie together. Like, we would be excited to do that because you contributed to the Kickstarter for the movie. So tell me a little bit about what you did, why you did it, and some of the perks, I believe, that you earned for doing so. So tell us about it.
Yeah, so this was one of the first major motion pictures that has been completely crowdfunded. Mm-hmm. And I found out about it because it was lighting up social media. Mm-hmm. People were posting and saying, if you want a Veronica Mars movie, this is the time. Yes. This is your moment. Yeah. And I was like, okay. And so I went. It was the first Kickstarter I had ever, contributed to. And they had different levels, and I picked a middle of the road level to support the movie. But yeah, they got fans to contribute, and what they did was they provided updates throughout the filming process, photos behind the scenes,
all the good stuff.
Some stickers. You got to pick from a number of different t-shirts. So there were some really cool things. So I have like a Mars investigation sticker, which I really ought to put on my office door, but I haven't yet.
Should.
Yeah, at some point I'm going to take like all of my really cool fandom stickers and cover my door with them.
Well, that's so cool to say, like, when you see the movie the DVD or just talking about it, say, like, I had a hand in that being possible. And I really enjoyed the movie, and that will be the 4th episode this month with Adri from Archaeopolitics. She's going to come on and talk about the movie. But that was an experience we had together. And I like how you said fandoms with a plural because let's be real, we're both nerds.
Oh, so nerdy. So yeah, there are a lot of different fandoms that I participate in.
Yes, tell me more.
Well, probably one of the first ones goes all the way back to high school. So I was a big fan of the X-Files. And so if you've ever been in my office, you see I have photos. I have, yes, the Barbie and Ken. I have all kinds of X-Files stuff in my office. And another one from high school was Bill and Ted's Excellent Adventure.
Oh, I love it.
I've seen that movie so many times that I can do all of the parts.
Oh, my God.
All of the parts.
I now know, like, I was like, before off mic we were talking about, I was like, let's have Lesley back on again, and we hadn't even recorded, so I told her, this is your audition. Jokingly, right? But I think that would be a really cool movie to analyze the friendship in, so you should come back and do Bill and Ted's, because they're making a new one, right?
They started filming yesterday.
Oh, well,
yesterday. Not that I'm like following it avidly, but I am, of course, because back when I lived in Maine, my license plate was Be Excellent. I still have them in my garage.
I love podcasting because you learn so much about people that you already thought you knew.
Yep, so
those are the ones from high school. What other have you added on fandoms over?
Oh, yes. Yeah. I pretty much got obsessed with anything that Joss Whedon writes. Mm-hmm. So it started with Buffy the Vampire Slayer, and then, of course, Angel was the spinoff, and then at the same time, Firefly came out, and I watched the first episode. I wasn't really sure. It certainly wasn't anything like Buffy or Angel.
Yeah.
And so I actually didn't watch it for a while. And I got back into it. So this is the weird part. I didn't watch it. And then a friend of mine in our department, another colleague, invited me to go see a movie.
Yeah.
I had no idea that it had anything to do with the TV show. And it was Serenity, which was the movie that came out after the show was canceled. And it was at that movie that I really had my first conversations with colleague Jeff Smith, who is now a dear friend. And we do a radio show together. We publish research together. Yeah. So it's really amazing how these different fandoms bring people together. And he was a part of getting that movie launched, which was very much a fan-pushed effort. And so he traveled to somewhere in the Midwest to actually watch the unedited features, like the film before it was even ready, when they hadn't put in the special effects and it was just the different scenes. So he saw really early versions of the movie.
Lucky. Now, I'm less familiar with that fandom specifically, but I love Buffy the Vampire Slayer. Used to watch Angel every morning when I would get ready for work.
Yes. Well, if you like those, I will have to introduce you to Firefly, because if you want to analyze relationships,
that's a good
put
one.
9 people on a small ship and watch the sparks fly.
We'll see what happens. Yeah.
And there's lots of different relationship tensions. It's a whole study in and of itself.
Well, that's what I think, though, is like, this is why we're attached to fandoms, is because of the people. It's because of the relationships and just falling in love with various characters. And so we are here, like, I'm like thinking in my head, there's more episodes to do with Lesley. And each one's a fandom. So it could be like fandom friendship with Lesley. It's a whole series.
I would love that. That would be so much fun.
And so the fandom, though, is Veronica Mars. So can you tell me a little bit about your favorite Veronica Mars character?
That's really tough because I love them all. And of course, there's the Logan-Veronica dynamic, which is a big part of the show. And so I would be remiss if I didn't say those two are my favorites.
Yeah.
But then there are so many other great characters. And I really like Mac because she is nerdy and sassy. I don't know why, but I just can relate to her so much. Yeah. So she's a favorite of mine.
Yeah. I mean, I think most people would say Veronica. Logan is another favorite character of mine, and I also really like Weevil. So
Well, he's the ultimate bad boy.
Yeah.
And, he's that guy that you never quite know what's going to happen when he's around, but guaranteed it's going to be interesting.
Well, I would say that about both Logan and Weevil, and
That's
that they're
true.
bad boys with a heart of gold, but
Yes.
just in different ways.
Well, a lot of the characters are people who are in some way damaged, but still well-meaning.
Yeah.
And so they have these prickly, snarky exteriors that hide those marshmallow interiors. And I love that she gets that comment in the very first episode that when she tries to brush off a nice thing, she's totally called on it and told that she's a marshmallow on the inside.
That's it, Veronica Mars. I'm a marshmallow.
That's right.
And I think that is where, that's the entire series is built upon her. And you talked about most people on the show are damaged in some way. And so you have like the marshmallow aspect, but you have whatever armor they might be wearing, or from Logan to Weevil to Veronica to everyone that we'll talk about. But of course, I think it's important to sort of set the tone of who Veronica is, and then recapping season 1 as a reminder. But I'm sure anyone who's a quasi marshmallow, is a marshmallow, or hopes to be one, is already started the rewatch of Veronica Mars, or their first watch on Hulu. And how lucky for those of you who are new Veronica Mars fans to discover it all over again. I love it.
Yes, that's so cool.
It's so cool. It's finally there. I've been watching it on my DVDs for years, and to have it on Hulu, I'm like, never leave.
Well, and if it hadn't been for the fans
Yeah.
pushing for the movie, crowdfunding a movie, they certainly wouldn't have anything, now that's coming out with new episodes. They had really stalled.
Yeah.
And so it's very exciting that we're getting new episodes.
Yeah, I always thought, like, if she was going to go into the FBI or something like that, that just could very well be starting with her as a teenager on the CW to being an adult sort of series on a CBS or something like that.
Yeah.
Totally makes sense. And there's already a built-in rabid fan group,
Yeah.
the Marshmallows, who are fans of Veronica Mars. And so there are people who want it. And so there's only 8 episodes in this series that's coming out on Hulu on July 26th. And I'm like, I have a feeling that might not be the end.
I hope it won't be,
Yeah.
but if past sets the precedent, then there'll be more.
Yeah.
Simply because I think people consistently underestimate this fan group.
Yeah.
So, when Veronica Mars rolled out as a Kickstarter, the movie, it broke Kickstarter.
Yeah.
It literally broke Kickstarter, and it was the fastest funded Kickstarter in the history of the company at that time.
Yeah.
They met their goal in hours.
Yeah, I read that they had reached the $2 million goal in 24 hours.
Yeah.
And then they got up way more than
Yeah.
that, ended up being able to do that. So it's like, the more money they get, the more they can do the movie they want, though, too.
Exactly.
So that's awesome.
So I think that, they may be pleasantly surprised by what's going to happen to their streaming service in the next couple of weeks.
Oh my God, I'm so excited. And if you are someone who listens to my show often, you're like, I don't even know what Veronica Mars is about. I hope we make a marshmallow out of you. But obviously, we need to know a little bit more about Veronica and also about season 1, which we're going to talk about today
Sure.
in terms of their friendship. So this is a quote from season 1. It's Veronica, who often speaks in voiceover and narrates the show. And so it says, tragedy blows through your life like a tornado, uprooting everything, creating chaos. You wait for the dust to settle, and then you choose. You can live in the wreckage and pretend it's still the mansion you remember. Or you can crawl from the rubble and slowly rebuild. Because after disaster strikes, the important thing is that you move on. But if you're like me, you just keep chasing the storm. The problem with chasing the storm is that it wears you down, breaks your spirit. Even the experts agree a girl needs closure. And I think this quote really reflects Veronica in this entire series, because so much changes in her life in a very short amount of time that has happened before season 1 begins. And so we pick up when she's in the storm, chasing that storm that's brought her down and trying to find closure. That's where we pick up and we meet Veronica Mars. And so let's talk a little bit about what season 1 is about. So Veronica Mars is a high school student who's absolutely been wrecked in absolute life-changing ways. Her best friend Lily Kane is brutally murdered, and her father, Keith Mars, who's the Neptune sheriff, is blamed for screwing up the investigation after blaming Lily's father, Jake Kane, for her murder. So Veronica's status completely changes at Neptune High School, and the town has also completely changed how they view the Mars family. So basically, what happens is her best friend is dead. Her boyfriend, Duncan Kane, yes, Lily's brother, just broke up with her, ended things without really any reason why. And what that meant was that she lost her entire network of friends, because Neptune is described in the very first episode as being low class or high class, that there's no middle class. Mm-hmm. You either are the celebrity, so to speak, or you're the one that works for the celebrities. And so her dad, being the sheriff, was always sort of in the lower class. And because her dad was sheriff, it kind of has some panache to it. And then dating Duncan Kane really allowed her to sort of, she describes it as being let past the red rope, like the red carpet ropes, like that she was allowed in. And so all these things changed when Duncan dumped her. And so her classmates end up being scared of her. They talk about her a lot. They gossip. And it's not only that. Her father is no longer the sheriff, and he's moved into a private investigator position. And as Lesley talked about, she has a Mars investigation sticker, so that represents the business. Her alcoholic mother, Leanne, has abandoned Keith and Veronica. And after attending a party at Shelley Pomeroy's at her house, and being drugged with GHB, Veronica is raped. It seems with good reason, that Veronica is much more a lone wolf now instead of a social butterfly that we see in flashbacks on the show. And so she works for her dad as an investigator business. She's supposed to be the one that answers the phones, but she's often doing the investigating because she's got the family skill. It's been passed down, right?
Yes, and I had forgotten that a lot of the time her dad was out of town because he was chasing claim jumpers.
Yeah.
And so he'd be like, I'll see you in 48 hours. And so she's just twiddling her thumbs, and cases are coming in. She's like, I can do this myself.
And then the dad probably doesn't even realize that some of those cases are being worked on, and then some cases she's not supposed to work on, which we see in the very first episode. There's a case with the Kane family, and he's like, don't do it. And then the next thing is her voiceover. So directly after my dad left, I caught Jake Kane from work, and I followed him. So she's very much the teenager, investigator. And I sort of describe her as a more mature, snarky, and maybe damaged version of Nancy Drew.
Absolutely.
And that's probably one of the reasons why I'm drawn to her, is because I've always loved Nancy Drew. So Veronica in this first season is basically, from that quote, is looking for closure. She wants to know who killed Lily, and she also wants to know who raped her. But in the meantime, as she's doing these things and we gain pieces of information that might help us see who killed Lily, see who raped Veronica, and she learns that information as well, she's basically helping all these classmates who are scared of her or talk shit about her.
Yes.
Helping them solve their own crimes and mysteries, right? Like, she's on the case at that school, and that poor principal.
She makes his life a hell.
Yeah, she does. And so she's not looking for just closure. What we see is also her navigating a completely new path in life, because she's no longer in the place that she was. And so I think that becomes really important to this particular episode, is that this being the first one in the first season, talking about who she is. And so I was trying to think of how you would describe Veronica Mars. Like, how would you describe the character? Besides damaged, which we
damaged is, I think, a good word. So she's a person that I think when you see her in flashbacks, she looks very young and very naive.
Yes.
And very innocent, not only in terms of, the experiences that she's had, but just not even being aware of things outside of her social circle or outside of her direct experience. And to see then the juxtaposition between that and who she is now. And I always think it's interesting that they they cut their hair, right? So as soon as they're, they go from like long, girlish
Cinderella,
hair, exactly.
Rapunzel type hair.
And then, by the time we meet her, she has a short, spiky, pixie type style, and that reflects her new saucy outlook on life.
Yeah.
And so when you've lost everything, and she has, right? So she's lost her home, she's lost her mom, she's lost her boyfriend, she's lost her best friend, and she's lost the affections of all of the other people in her school that she considered friends and that were part of like making her life stable. And she's lost her own sense of like personal safety and security because she's been assaulted.
Yes.
So she has to decide, as she says in the quote, what she's going to do, how she's going to deal with that. And she comes out of that. She loses a lot of her naivete, and she moves on to be more prickly, less trusting, but still with that kind heart underneath. But she's certainly much more selective about who she helps. And she certainly has a lot of mistrust for even the people that do reach out to her with friendship.
Yeah. And I mean, on top of that, I think that she was always someone who was probably clever and intelligent, because I feel like that is who she is, and she has a knack for the things that she's doing with the investigations business, that sort of thing, with her father. But you add on this whole level of snark, and then I think because of everything she's gone through, there's this sense of resilience. And I was reading a Vanity Fair article about it, and that's one of the words that Rob Thomas, who wrote the series Veronica Mars, he described her as being resilient. But I also see her as being risk-taking in some ways too. And I think it's because she is so desperate for closure in a lot of different ways, and just having difficulty, even though I think she's really has a level of high self-esteem in some ways. Like, she knows who she is in some ways because she's experienced so much.
Yes.
And that might be in some ways well, I'm closing myself off to people, but she knows precisely who she is. She's quite self-assured. And I think that is very direct and in other people's faces. It's almost like they don't know what to do with it. While at the same time, she will risk a lot because she's trying to find closure. She still wants her parents to get back together. She wants her mom to come home. She wants that best friend. She wants a partner. And it's like, but all those things are 100% difficult for her.
They are, and for good reason, because she's been burned. And I think that's one of the things that's most interesting about her as a character, is how she's navigated the loss of that innocence, and how she's put up these defenses. And she goes from being very open, I think. So I got the impression from the flashbacks that she's open to relationships, but then now she really likes to hold people at arm's length, and she often will talk about favors. And I think that's a central theme of the first season, especially, where it's not that she is negotiating relationships with people, but she's doing them favors and she's calling in favors. So she really reduces those relationships to transactions. Right? So I'll help you in this way if you help me in that way. And therefore, I don't have to trust you or rely on you, but instead, I'm relying on the threat of mutually assured destruction to keep us both in line.
And reciprocity is so persuasive. Like, you did this for me, now I feel like I have to owe you. Remember when I, borrowed $5 and it's like, oh, okay, yeah, I'm going to give it to you. So even if they don't want to help her back, I feel like there's this pressure to do so. And I do like how you say that it's just solely transactions. Another way I see it as, like, it's all task oriented to solving whatever crime or mystery that they might be working on. And I think that really goes, like, those flashbacks, you talked about she has the long hair and now she has, like, the short hair. She was in a lot of pink. She was bright and colorful. Now her clothes are all dark. It's really showing that she's gone through something, but she just had this pure view of people and the world and life, even though those people that she was around, her friends, like Lily was
kind of crazy.
She's a troublemaker.
She is.
She
Although I think
riles
she's
people.
damaged too.
Yes.
Right? So she's a troublemaker for some very important reasons.
Yeah.
But yeah, I noticed that when they do the flashbacks, they're almost misty.
Yes.
As though everything's wrapped in cotton.
Yeah.
You know, and because I think her life was wrapped in cotton until then. And now she has to be resilient. And I think that she's a risk taker because she's already had everything taken away from her. So she's the quintessential dangerous woman who has nothing left to lose. So when you've lost everything, you can afford to take social risks because what are they going to do? Shun you?
Yeah.
You know, she's
already
already
been
there.
shunned,
So
yeah.
it's like, you know, I have nothing left to lose. They already
Yeah.
think the absolute worst of me.
Yeah.
So I can do whatever I want, which I get the impression from her that although that is absolutely what broke her,
Yeah.
it also kind of freed her to be this other person that I think the bones were there,
Yeah.
but she would never have become that person had this not happened.
She reminds me a lot of Lily in ways, like how Lily was when she was alive, but like Lily was a little bit more shiny and positive and kind of like
Rich.
wee! Yeah, and rich, where there's a little bit still more of that salty, bitter sort of like aspects of Veronica, but I feel like she was so mesmerized by her best friend and sort of her impulsiveness and her trouble, but she was still kind of the good girl out of the two of them.
Sure.
By far. And then I feel like Lily would be proud of her in a lot of ways. You know what I mean?
I think that without Lily in her life, I think she did step into some of those roles that Lily used to play and realized that if she really wanted closure, she wasn't going to get it by pining away and waiting for it to come to her.
Yeah.
She had to go and find it.
She's got to make it happen.
That's right.
So this being a friendship-focused podcast, which I think we've touched on those things, I like to get into a little bit more, but as we go into some relationships, kind of want to talk about some of the key players. So we have Veronica and her dad, Keith, her new best friend, Wallace, who we'll talk about, Wallace Fennell, who's... Did I list him as a favorite character? I love him too. Can I love everyone?
They're just great characters.
They're so good. And then we've already mentioned Lily and Duncan. Weevil is sort of the leader of the local Neptune biker gang.
Yes.
As you might not even guessed would exist there, but sure. But we also have the very two different worlds. And so I think he's reflecting that side, which is probably the reason why him and Veronica are friends. We have Logan Eccles, Duncan's best friend.
She describes every school needs a jerk and sociopath.
Psychotic, obligatory psychotic.
Exactly.
Yeah. And his even worse best friend, Dick Casablancas.
Who never has a character been so aptly named.
Yes, I mean, he is a dick. Okay, and then there's Mac, who Lesley loves, and she and Veronica becomes friends. We have Sheriff Don Lamb, who's also a dick.
There are a lot of people who are just really horrible.
Yeah, and he's the sheriff that was in place after Keith Mars was removed. And then, I don't know if this will come up as much in this episode, but another key player is Cassidy Beaver Casablancas, which is the younger brother of Dick. So, and he has unfortunate names.
Yes. Well, they named their kids Dick and Beaver. I mean, there's just no mistaking where that was going.
Good point. So you might hear us mention some of those people. We'll talk about them a little bit more in depth, or you'll hear about them over the next several episodes at the very least. And so in terms of, now I've watched the entire first season, and Lesley has watched some of the episodes, and both of us have seen it so many times anyways, but it was just really thinking of it through that friendship lens and what seems to be most concerned, what we should be most concerned with in terms of friendship in season 1. And something that we have touched on, I think the very first thing, is that Veronica is ostracized. She has a lack of friendship because as everything changed for her, she lost that network of friends. But I think you had something specific that you wanted to add there that I thought was really great.
It's not just that she's lost her friendships, which would be devastating enough, but it's that she's being actively shunned by the people that used to accept her. And so partly that's because her dad lost that social position of sheriff, which was an elected position. And so he's no longer in that role. And he's now, and they've fallen on hard times financially. So she no longer lives in the same neighborhood that she had lived in. She lives in an apartment. And so a lot has changed in her life. And getting at that idea of being socially ostracized when you have to go to school every day and look at the people who are openly mocking you, and the courage that takes every single day to get out of bed and face that. And in fact, the party that she goes to when she is unfortunately assaulted, she said that the reason she went to the party was because her dad had just been removed from his job, and she wanted to show them that she was okay, that she knew that they were all talking about her and they were all stabbing her in the back, but she was going to go and show them. So she consistently, even before she lost everything, she was still absolutely fighting the good fight and refusing to allow herself to be seen by them as broken.
And I think that's really interesting, because I think that anyone who's been bullied in school or rejected or ostracized, but not only that, because they are saying that she's a whore, not that she is a victim of rape, right? And so she has these names. There's lots of things that they talk about: her car, the way she looks, her clothes, like her dad, the murder case. Like, there's just so many things in which they're constantly coming at her with. And it's just that most of us would just want to go home and never come out again.
I think that most people in that situation would have just packed their bags and moved, which is exactly what her mother did. She couldn't take the heat, and they describe her as a person who needed that social position. And when she lost it, she self-medicated with alcohol and finally ended up just saying, I can't do this, and packing up and leaving. And I think a lot of people in that situation would be tempted to do the same. And say, I can't do this. I'm just going to have to go somewhere else and start over. And Veronica describes her father as being unwilling to be run out of the town. So he's been removed from his position. He can't do anything about that. But he stubbornly refuses to leave. He could go to another town and run for sheriff, but he is really stubborn. And he's like, nope, I will not let them break me. So that's clearly where Veronica gets her spine from.
It's from the dad, for sure. And he's great. I mean, God, talk about a great character. And I always love it when he's like, who's your daddy? And she's like, I hate when you say that. And I'm like, oh, it cracks me up every single time.
It's such a dad joke.
It is such a dad joke. He had classic dad jokes before we were really labeling them as dad jokes. Right. But I think that's what makes her, in a lot of ways, people are talking about her, but as the series goes on, and even in season 1, you start to see people come back.
Well, I think they admire her.
There's a level of respect.
So even if, even as they mock her openly, there's this kind of grudging admiration, because I think a lot of them look at her and think, if I were in her shoes, I wouldn't be able to handle this, and I would be running away. And yet she kind of personifies that notion of grit. She's just stubbornly sticking in there and will not let them see her cry, you know.
And she'll eat lunch by herself. She will go to classes. She does everything that a student would do. And when they say things to her, she has very smart, witty, snarky comebacks that are classics.
Yes.
Right? Everything is a quote. You want, like, sewed on a pillow.
Exactly. Yeah, that's clearly her defense mechanism is snark, but man, what a great defense mechanism she has. Yeah. She does snark better than anyone.
I admire her. I want
her snark. That I can be snarky, but man, she takes it to a whole new level.
When I grow up, I want to be
Veronica Mars.
I want to be Veronica Mars. And that bag she has in season 3. I'll put a picture for those of you who don't know, but I think Marshmallows know what bag I'm talking about with the. Okay, this isn't a visual media.
Like the little spikes.
Yes. Yep. On the shoulders. God, why can't I describe a bag?
Well, I think, she wears a lot of leather, especially as the seasons progress. And I think it is reflecting that she has gone from, the organza, tulle dresses to, I mean, she's in leather by the end, and with studded leather even.
Yeah.
So she's clearly reflecting on the outside with her spiky hair and spiky clothes, that she does not want to be messed with, which is actually hilarious because the actress who plays her is, of course, Kristen Bell, who's like 5 foot, I don't know, maybe 2.
Yeah.
At the time, she probably weighed less than 100 pounds.
She's petite.
It's hard, it's hard to come off as a badass when you're a tiny little blonde.
Yeah.
But she does, she makes it work.
Backup. And if those of you are not familiar, Backup's the family dog, which is a pit bull.
Right.
And then she also has her zappery thing. What do you call it?
Taser.
Taser, yeah. You're good with a taser and Backup.
And it was always so funny when she tasered people.
Yeah. I mean, in the preview for season 4, she just has the taser. She's just like, zzz, and I'm like, yes.
And I love that she then poses next to the person she's dropped and is like, for the gram.
Takes a picture.
Takes a photo,
Instagram.
selfie with
We're
them.
so excited. But I think it's interesting that you talked about that she has sort of this, exterior up. So it's like, you're not going to mess with me. And I think that becomes very clear in her relationship with Wallace. Mm-hmm. So Wallace is the sweetest guy on the entire world. I love this character, and in some cases, I don't think Veronica always deserves him. To be perfectly honest,
no. Well, because she's still very damaged, and
he's not quite there.
well, he's the new kid. I mean, he really didn't have damage.
Yeah.
He was just new and happened to blunder into a situation that put him on bad terms with the local biker gang. And that's where we first meet him, is when he's been stripped naked and duct taped to a flagpole at the front of the school.
Yeah.
And everyone's standing around taking photos of him, and Veronica Mars walks up and cuts him down.
And I like it. And she's like, school spirit, go Pirates!
Yep, because she's, again, she's reminding them of what hypocrites they are.
Exactly. And so I think he takes this as maybe the gate opening to perhaps a friendship. And so he finds her at lunch and he sits down and she's kind of making a face and he's like, are you okay? And she looks up and she's like, did I say you could sit here? And then he's about to pack up his bag and go, and it makes me so sad. And she goes, wait, you can sit wherever you want. And he stays, and that's where they forge their friendship. And in a way, like, she made the right decision there. Everyone else was, what's the word I'm looking for? Cowards? I mean, high school's hard. High
school is hard. And I think there are people who would have been friends with her, except that she was, at that point, considered such tainted goods that they didn't want to end up tainted by association.
Yes.
So she's used to sitting by herself, and she doesn't trust when this new kid comes over and just wants to be her friend.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But I'm so glad that she realized, like, no, she can't tell him what to do. Like, she doesn't own this lunch table at this school. And she's like, no, you can sit wherever you want. And he decides to sit back down, even though she doesn't seem very happy about him being there. And so they start to become friends, but he doesn't know anything about her or what's happened. And so I think some of that he learns, but I don't think that he cares because it's about him and Veronica being friends.
Right.
And I appreciate their friendship, but as I mentioned, I don't think that she deserves him because, as you were saying, she brings everything down to a transaction, and she relies on Wallace so much to help her with whatever she's working on, to save her when she gets locked in the trunk of her car. He works in the main office, and she's like, I need that kid's permanent file. Like, how many permanent files has Wallace gotten for Veronica?
So many. And you'd think at some point someone would have noticed them going missing and put 2 and 2 together, but she often puts him into situations where, I mean, actually he could be harmed by those situations, either reputation or he could end up in jail. And in fact, he does pay the price, and his mother pays the price at times for those choices. But I think she sees it as that transaction, and I'll do you a favor, you do me a favor, because that's safer. Yeah. She doesn't want to depend on him. Sure, he can do things for her, and she likes to use him for those things. But it's very hard for her to trust.
Yeah. And I feel like she does take advantage. And I think that there's at a certain level that although she's been cut off from her network of friends beforehand from Wallace, before Wallace was the new kid at school, and it's almost like she now sees friendship as the transactions.
Yes.
So it's like simply that's what friends do. So of course Wallace is going to do this for me without any questions asked and without really knowing whether or not he's as much of a risk taker as she is. Because I, for example, don't like to break rules. And so I'd be like, a permanent file? You're asking me to do what? Oh, wait, and then to go to this place and pretend to be someone else or talk to this person who could be a criminal and do all these sorts of things. And it's like, he does it for her. But I do think that he sees her as a friend, and so then he starts to see that as what their friendship is. That he's there to help her, but how often does she help him? And I think if you're doing a tit for tat, that there's a running tally that Wallace, again, just permanent files alone, not even any other dangerous situations, outweighs the things that she's done for him.
Absolutely.
But maybe in some view it's, but when she cut me down from the flagpole, which is one of the worst things that can happen to a student in high school, to a person being stripped down naked by a gang of folks that ride bikes, right? And then being duct taped for everyone in which to mock you. I mean, that school needs to get it together.
Well, and I think, because I wondered sometimes, what does Wallace get out of this? Like, why is he in this?
Yeah.
Especially
That's a great
when
question.
when they first become friends and he comes up to her and he says, girl, do you know what they're saying, what people say about you? And she's just like, yeah, whatever. So he's heard what the story is. I'm sure people took him aside and said, do you know who you're getting involved with? But on the other hand, he also saw all the members of the school standing around taking selfies with his nude self, where she was the only person willing to do what was right. And so I think for him, he thinks that he knows her as a person.
Yeah. That
and
might
she's
be
a
enough
good
to know
person.
about someone is the person who cuts the person down from the flagpole. You've learned enough about that person to be like, that's who I want to be around. That's who I would want to associate myself. The person that if I was in trouble or was being harmed is going to be sure it doesn't happen to me, right? They're going to defend or protect me or help me.
And from his view, not only was she the only one who did it, but she was the only one who would stand up to the biker gang and all the people taking photos to help out a person she'd never met. So I think for him, he's just decided she is worthy.
Yeah.
And even though there are times where she does things that kind of tarnish that notion of her being worthy, he keeps coming back because he ultimately believes that she is. Oh. Isn't that cute? That's why he's such a great character.
Wallace and Veronica forever best friends.
They are good besties.
They need the necklace's best and friend.
And one of the episodes that I reviewed for this was the one where he says, I would really appreciate it if my mom wasn't dating my best friend's dad.
Yeah.
And she says, "Oh, I'm your best friend," because even though he is literally her only friend, she hasn't used that label.
Yeah.
And I think she would be the last person to initiate something like that because she doesn't trust. Yeah. And it's not even until several scenes later, later day where she says, well, you're my best friend too. But it's this very grudging admission from a person that doesn't want to have to depend on anyone.
Yeah. That was the Clash of the Tritons, right? That episode, because that's the one where she also gets locked in the trunk of the car and the only person she can call without her dad being, because one of the things, her and her dad have a great I think daughter-father relationship. However, there are times when she'll risk him being mad at her or whatever the case is to make something happen and to solve a case. And I think there's some pride in being able to get closure for someone if she hasn't gotten closure for herself.
That's a good point.
And so she's trying to bust this secret Triton group, kind of like what are they called? The skulls at other schools and that sort of thing. So they're trying to bust this secret group, and they lock her in there. Someone locks her in the trunk of the car, and she has to call Wallace.
Yeah.
And it's kind of like, thanks, bye. It's all right, check you later. That's it.
Yeah.
But yeah, I love that episode because that is the moment where he's like, oh, my best friend. And she's like, oh, we're best friends. And so it's So we do have those moments in our friendships where we either go, this is such a good friend of mine, I'm so glad we're friends, or there's that moment where it's shared together, like where you label somehow together. Not quite like you might do in a romantic relationship. Some people probably never label their friendships, but I also think it can be a very important communicative event. And I think even if that's not something she would ever do, I'm sure there was a sense of, yeah, this guy has got me and I got him. And I think that's a really cool moment in the series, even though he gets pissed at her because she's constantly asking him for things and she doesn't ask anything
easy
about him.
Yeah.
And then they have a moment where she finally tells him about being raped. And I think, there's these moments, like that moment in particular, I think that was one of the most vulnerable moments of the entire first season, in the sense of letting someone know what has happened to her without like a taser in hand, or her taser of a tongue, if you will, in terms of like her language and how she can zap people with her words. But usually, she'll talk about it and people know. But that's when she's really truly revealing it to someone for other reasons other than trying to accuse someone of doing it or finding out what happened.
Yeah, the only person she had told back when it happened was the new Sheriff Lamb, who was horrible and no help whatsoever. Basically told her, get over it. And so she didn't tell her dad.
Yeah.
She didn't tell, and her mom was gone. Her best friend was gone.
Yeah.
So she didn't tell anyone.
Yeah.
And I think she really carried that burden until Wallace.
Yeah. And I think that's a really important scene. And it's not, they don't spend a lot of time on it. It's in fact, if you're, streaming or binging or something, you could miss it.
Yeah.
And so if you are watching season 1 right now, look for it. It's in the later season of season 1, but they don't have to do the whole discussion, but they're having that moment together, and that's what is needed. And I think it's a sign to Wallace why she might be keeping people at arm's length.
Yeah.
And that, and that's just the way things have been. And so there's a level of understanding that they haven't had before that I think is really important.
And there's some fun gender dynamics too that they're playing with here. So you have the prickly, less emotionally disclosive female character, and the much more open, trusting person who puts it all on the line for his relationships in the form of Wallace. So kind of a little spin on the traditional gender roles. And he's often the one chasing after her, again, rather than the other way around.
Yeah.
But we also don't see a whole lot of male-female friendships in TV shows, and even when there are those friendships, it's a group.
Yeah.
Right. So you see, like in the show Friends.
But they've all kissed each other in flashback episodes.
Exactly.
Obviously, except for the siblings,
But a truly platonic male-female friendship is a rare thing to find.
Yeah. And it truly is. There has never been one inkling of, I have a crush on. Thank you, Rob Thomas.
Yes.
Thank you. Because I will present this, and now Lesley and I teach similar topics. Lying and deception, dark side of communication, interpersonal communication, all of the good stuff. Am I right?
Absolutely.
But I'll present that in classes. I'll be like, tell me examples of a platonic friendship on television or in the movies. And it's like, other than maybe Hermione and Harry.
Right. One that isn't fraught with the tension that it's going to become a romantic relationship.
Exactly, yeah.
And even Hermione and Harry had their moment where they had a choice to make.
Yes.
So it's really interesting to see where they don't really have that moment.
Nope,
they are best friends very quickly, and it doesn't change throughout the show.
Now, we say that and we haven't seen the 8 episodes in Hulu, so Rob Thomas.
That's true. Don't let us down, Rob.
But
don't screw it up.
Team Logan. Right?
Absolutely.
Now, Wallace will be someone that we'll be talking about on the podcast all month long because he is a consistent friendship feature. And so I think it'll be interesting to see how their relationship stays the same or how there might be some up and downs throughout it. But maybe one of the most surprising friendships that Veronica has is with Eli Weevil Navarro, who is the head of that bike gang, who duct taped
her best friend
to the flagpole that she had to cut down. Now, when that happened, they had a hate-hate relationship.
Yes.
And so it seems surprising that they would become friends. Were you surprised by that?
I was, and one of the things that I appreciate is that because they had this kind of, as you said, hate-hate relationship, but whenever they disagreed, there was always this kind of subtext that it was still friendly. So she would be giving a sick burn, but still there'd be kind of this wink, wink, nudge, nudge. Yeah. What I'm saying is still kind of funny.
Yeah.
And it never became too personal. So so they weren't enemies in such a way that they were doing irreparable harm.
Yeah.
And when ultimately it came down to it, they were able to do favors for one another. And one of the things I mentioned I like best about this show is that even the folks that are kind of originally presented as bad characters or negative characters, we find out more about their backstories that make them full-fledged characters and not just two-dimensional
They're very
bad
layered.
guys.
Yeah.
So as we get to know Weevil, who we can rely on every stereotype of, the typical biker guy.
Yeah.
He actually has overcome a lot in his life, and we find out that he can be vulnerable, and that we find even in the first season that he had fallen for this rich 09er girl.
Oh, what was her name? Lily Kane.
Yeah, she got around. So we find out that not only did he like her, but he had given her his grandmother's ring, that he loved her, which is not something that would go with that stereotype. But again, she finds out these things and then views these folks differently because she knows their vulnerabilities.
And I also think that this level of, as I mentioned, that although she hasn't quite gotten closure on her own mystery or cases of Lily and who has raped her, that she has a personal goal, if you will, to solve any mystery that comes to her. And so when she sees that Eli is being sort of railroaded, and this is early on in the season 1, so it went really fast from here's the guy that taped up Wallace because Wallace did this thing and that thing to his gang or whatever, watch the show.
Right.
There's all this backstory and that sort of thing. But it goes from this sort of negative situation to her then trying to solve a mystery where he has been railroaded in some ways and he's going to end up in jail or this, that, or the other thing. And so I think she does have sort of this personal commitment to solving crimes because maybe that'll help her solve the ones that she's involved in or that she's most interested in. And I like how you said that their level of respect, I feel like they have the same level of sense of humor and that they get each other that way. I think they both have been damaged. So there's that level of connection there. And I think they also know what it's like to be on the wrong side of the tracks in comparison to the 09ers who are the rich kids. Yeah. And so I think they have a lot of things in common. I think they have a lot of respect for each other and that he also operates on transactions.
Yes.
And so I think that although on the face value of it, it might seem like a surprising friendship, it's one of my favorite friendships in the show because they hate each other, but then it's like, oh, that was a good one. Okay, you got me on that joke. Okay, I'm not going to touch that one. I need your help. Okay, I'll help you. And they just have things that need to get done that they know the other can do without it getting too personal. But then it turns personal, if you know what I mean. They become friends whether they wanted to or not. And
I think it's based in that grudging respect where it's like they both look at each other and as they get to know each other better and they realize some of the other's vulnerabilities and how much they've had to overcome, what they have to deal with when they've both been treated as other within this system that they're in, that they respect how each of them has dealt with the hand that they've been given. And so she doesn't try to change him. She doesn't tell him, you need to ditch the biker gang and, wear preppy shirts. She respects him for what he is and what he's had to do to survive that social situation. And I think he does the same thing. He looks at her and at first it's, sad little rich girl. But as he gets to know her better and he sees exactly what she's up against in terms of, people breaking the headlights of her car and, just generally treating her horribly, I think he sees a lot of similarity between them, which makes it really hard for him to not respect the way that she's handling that situation.
And I think that's might be one of her qualities that we haven't mentioned yet that I think lead people to come back and ask for her help, even though she is obviously can solve all the crimes. So her percentage of solving is like 115%?
Yes.
Which, I mean, she's got the skills, right? But she has a level of accepting people for who they are, even when they're the obligatory psychotic kid of the school.
Yes.
Or they're the head of the biker gang. I think the only time, other than when people kind of lie to her or they do something and she puts them in their place, the only time I remember in this first season that she really got after anyone was the girl who her dog ran away or got stolen, and she kind of got run all over and people made fun of her and she was teased a lot. And then Veronica just gets after her and says, if you want respect, you have to demand it.
Yes.
But otherwise, she is always accepting of people. And part of me, although she is not like that girl who lost the dog who gets walked all over, I feel like she feels like that girl based on everything that's happened to her. So I think in a way she's like saying to herself, you need to demand respect. And that's where she could pull herself up by the bootstraps and go to that party, go to that school every day, sit by herself. But that's why people come up to her, because she doesn't care. She will help you.
Yeah. And it's amazing. Even the people that have treated her so badly will come up to her and she could be really vengeful, and there are times where she does get a little
petty.
Well, a little like friendly revenge. So she gets revenge, but never too personal. More like she just kind of subtly embarrasses people.
Like reminds them of what they did.
But still, when they come to her and they ask for help, she gives them help. Even if she will say, well, you're going to have to pay me, or, she'll make it so it's kind of difficult, but she always does give the help, even if they've treated her horribly. And I think that's one of the things that people respect about her is that she doesn't ultimately hold the grudge, even though she has every reason to do so.
Yeah. Yeah. And most of us would.
Yeah, absolutely. I'd be like, listen, folks, you made your bed. Enjoy that.
Yeah. Lie in that. Do you need a blanket?
That's right.
Get cozy in that bed you made. Well, now, those, I think, are some of the most primary friendships, either just being completely ostracized by the friend group, meeting the new kid Wallace, meeting the mean kid Weevil.
Yes.
Who isn't new, had been mean, but then they forge a friendship. There are some other things that are critical during the season. I think one of them we have touched on is her friendship with Lily, which we see consistently through flashbacks. And so we learn a lot about sort of her naive view on the world and sort of that wild child sort of aspect of Lily and how that, I think, rubs off on her, or that idea that we do have, we all, I think, have that friend like Lily.
That wild and crazy friend that always goes just a little bit further than you would.
Yeah.
And but kind of pushes those boundaries.
Yeah. And maybe gets you out of your comfort zone and that sort of thing. So I feel like although her life is tragically cut short, and then the show focuses on solving her murder, that Veronica learned a lot from Lily that carried with her. And for me personally, I relate to this. One of my best friends, Allison, was killed in a car accident. I've talked about her a little bit on the show before. And she passed away when she was 16 years old, so right before her senior year in high school. And she reminds me a lot of Lily. There are lots of things that she's not like Lily, but this idea is sort of impulsive and exciting and fun and always got the smile on her face, always sort of like the center of attention. And that, one of the things that how we describe Allison is like sunshine. Like the sun is just over you shining, and it's warm and it's bright and it feels good, and she was so much fun. And so that's one of the things, like, how difficult it is to lose someone who has such, like, this positive spirit or energy in your life, even though Lily was into some danger zone situations. But, like, of her on face value of just being fun and just doing what she wants, it reminded me so much of Allison. And so when I saw this show, I was like, oh, in this case, I'm Veronica and Allison is, like, Lily, and just, like, what it was like in the aftermath of losing a friend, and just how, like, devastating it is. Just, and we don't talk about losing friends. You know, a lot of times people's first funerals are family members and not friends. And so losing someone in high school, I think the fact that Rob Thomas would cover a murder, a loss of a friend in high school, a rape, I think he didn't only just push boundaries, but really get at things that we don't discuss. Yeah. That should be front and center, because how many people lose their friends in car accidents or other things, and how we're able to cope with that. And for Veronica, it was just another tornado and that storm that she was dealing with. And that one tornado alone would have been enough.
It would have.
And so to me, I think that's one of the things that sticks out from this show, is, like, truly thinking about how people move on after a loss of a friend, because that's not something we discuss. We often think that our friends are simply going to be there, or that there might be other friends or this, that, the other thing. But losing Lily, that is a void that she's unlikely to fill with any other person.
Yeah. And, you know, she, at that point in her life, Lily's death really sets off this cascade of actions that leads to the destruction of her life. And at that point, she loses all forms of social support that you would use to get through that kind of trauma, right? Her mom is gone. Her best friend is gone. She's lost, you know, her boyfriend's left her, and she's lost her social circle of other friends that she could talk to about those things. And I think that's why she becomes so resilient and self-contained, is because she doesn't have other folks that she can lean on that way, with the exception of her dad. And she describes him in season 1 as the one person in the world she knew she could trust.
Yeah, but he doesn't know that she's been raped. Right. And he doesn't often know, but sometimes is way smarter and ahead of the game on her when it comes to the murder investigation. He has the files, he has these things, and she's trying to get at him, and she's done it, I think, secretly for a while, and then he starts to become aware that she's interested in that investigation and doesn't want her to participate.
There are a lot of secrets that they end up keeping from one another. Yeah. And, you know, it's only when you look back at the season in retrospect that you understand all of the secrets. So we know that fairly early that she's not told her dad that she was assaulted. But it's only later in the season that we start to understand that he has kept secrets about his marriage, about her paternity, and the different relationships that have been going on around her that she had no idea about. Yeah,
because she was in that cotton ball of...
That's right. It was too soft focused to know about any of those things. But that Neptune is a town of secrets, and that those secrets themselves can threaten even the most trusting relationship.
Yeah. And, you know, you might expect some of that, because not every kid is going to tell their parents everything, and not every parent should be expected to tell them everything to their children. And so I think you can expect some level of that. But like you said, if she's lost her entire network of folks that she might depend on to talk about these things until Wallace arrives, then you might hope that she would talk to her dad, but she doesn't. Right. And one other friend that we haven't talked about that she lost is Lily's boyfriend, Logan, who's Duncan's best friend, and that obligatory psychotic kid that every high school has, according to Veronica Mars. And there's a quote in that same episode that we were talking about, Class of the Tritons, where each of them kind of go talk to the school counselor about what's happening. Or, you know, I think she calls them all in to talk who've been impacted by the loss of Lily. And unbeknownst to them, of course, Veronica has bugged the office and she's listening to the conversations. And in this conversation with the school counselor, she says to Logan, "It sounds like you blame Veronica for Lily's death." And he says, quote, "You know, Veronica was my friend too." And if she hadn't ratted me out, then Lily and I would have stayed together, and Lily wouldn't have been there. So yeah, I blame Veronica, and I blame myself for being stupid, and I blame Lily for being a bitch that week, end quote. And so he has a kiss with another girl, just something brief, and she tells Lily, and they sort of cut that girl out of their life because she's protecting her best friend Lily. But Logan was a constant in Veronica's circle. So even if he is psychotic, and I think he's more so from his high school girlfriend Lily being murdered,
right,
and his family than anything else, that he was probably doing, he's very damaged as well. But I think that it was really Lily that kind of spun him out of control.
Yeah.
But before that, they did everything together. It was Duncan, Lily, Logan, and Veronica. And so Duncan broke up with Veronica. And if he blames Veronica for Lily's death, then they can't depend on each other,
right?
For that support that they may have gotten in that group setting, as you kind of mentioned before about cross-sex friendships. It's might be in a group.
Well, he can't blame Lily because she's not there. She's gone. And of course we don't like to speak ill of the dead.
Yes.
So everyone's now putting her on a pedestal and forgetting the wild child that she was.
Yes.
So he can't take out his anger on her, and it's too painful to put the blame on himself. So that only leaves Veronica. And he does lash out at her. And when we first meet him, he's so horrible to her.
Oh, God.
And again, Rob Thomas could have just said, here's this, jerk guy who is a really two-dimensional character, is just a bully.
Yeah.
But when we find out why he acts the way he does, and the fact that he, being rich does not mean that you have always a great life.
Yeah.
And it certainly doesn't protect you from some of the problems that we face in society.
Yeah.
And so he actually has his own reasons for being angry and damaged and defensive. And I think that they both use snark and and that kind of subtle social cruelty to protect themselves because they are hurting.
So it's no surprise, spoiler alert, that the two might come together in a very magnetic, passionate
Yes, absolutely. I went back and watched the episode, and I thought, knowing what's going to happen, I'm sure that it won't have as much of an impact. And I watched it, and I was like, no, that's still really, really impressive.
It's a great scene.
It's a great scene. It's worth going back and watching again.
Yeah, and I think probably where we, if not before, where we both started being Team Logan.
And if you had started, if you had asked me when I started watching Veronica Mars, I thought she was going to get back with Duncan. I thought that there was going to be this moment where they figured out all of the stuff around Lily's death, and the two of them got back together. So Rob Thomas really took his audience for a ride when instead, only a few episodes after Logan is smashing the headlights of her car, that he's then asking her for help, breaking down in her arms, and later that they're together as a couple. Yeah. So, and really when you think about it, that whole arc happened over maybe 4, 5, 6 episodes.
This is perfect.
And yet it never felt forced or rushed, that development from we're enemies, we're both really hurt, to now we're seeking solace from one another. Yeah. It's really interesting how that all happens so quickly without it feeling forced.
And almost like also a gentle surprise with the, I like where this is going. Like a, what's that? Oh, this is oh.
It's like, I didn't see this coming, and yet I'm kind of good with it. In fact, this is really kind of awesome. What's going to happen next?
Yeah, and then, of course, they play a little back and forth for several episodes, and the amazing cliffhanger at the end of season 1 is where you see a lot of Duncan, you see a little Logan, and then at 3 something in the morning, there's a knock on her door, and she opens it, and there's a figure in the shadow, and she goes, "I'm so glad it's you."
I hoped it was you.
Or I hoped it was you. Thank you.
And we don't know. I'm only imagining the folks that had to agonize over that cliffhanger all summer.
Yeah.
Going, so what? what was she, who was it and what happened?
Yeah.
And although you had a pretty good idea that it was either going to be Logan or Duncan, I think when you finally do get resolution to that in the first episode of season 2.
Yeah, and thank you for doing that, coming back immediately.
That would have been horrible if they had dragged it out. Yeah. But it doesn't turn out the way that you would think it would.
Yes.
And that's Rob Thomas. He, just when you think you've got it figured out, he's always got another twist or turn to throw your way.
Yeah.
And just like you don't think she's going to end up with this bad boy who gives her a hard time, you still end up rooting for them in the end. Yeah. And I think that's the brilliance of this show.
Yeah, and there are so many twists and turns, and there's only so many relationships or aspects that we can cover in this episode, for example. And so I have a bunch of friends who are going to help me make this the best Veronica Mars month of July ever. And so I have my friend Courtney from Spoop Hour who's going to come on and talk about the friendship of Veronica and Meg, which will become critical in season 2. We're going to be talking more about Lesley's favorite character, Mac. We have to talk a little bit more about Duncan and paternity and the Canes and the Mars, and that's a whole other can of worms. And then, there's so much, and like you said, the brilliance of it is the twists and turns, but nothing is two-dimensional.
Right.
Because nothing in life, unless it's two-dimensional, but you know what I mean? Like, people and relationships are not two-dimensional.
Exactly.
So, to bring this all together, what is your overall idea of season 1? What do you think about season 1?
Well, one of the fandoms that I enjoy is Joss Whedon's Angel.
Yes.
And there's a quote from one of those episodes where Angel has this epiphany and says, if nothing we do matters, then all that matters is what we do. And I love that quote because it means that you stand by your principles, that, if you're in a hopeless, futile situation where nothing you do is going to change the underlying system you're stuck in, then all that really matters is what you stand for. Mm. And to me, that kind of summarizes Veronica Mars. She's had everything taken away from her in ways that she can't do a thing about. She tried to go to the sheriff about her assault. He laughed it off. So she has no recourse but to figure it out on her own. Her mom has left and is an alcoholic. And despite all of her attempts to help in that situation, she can't and has to just accept that's the way it is. All of these, her best friend is dead and there's no going back there. Her boyfriend has left her and is damaged and there's nothing she can do about that. So she's in this kind of situation where it seems like there's nothing she could do to make her situation better. So what does she do? She decides to help people and find her own closure and her own meaning in the help that she provides for others. That she does while holding them at arm's length so that they don't hurt her, but she
Personal
will help
bubble,
them.
Please no entry.
So I mean, I love that because resilience is a great word for her, and I think that's what that quote is all about. Is that when everything goes wrong and there's nothing you can do to fix it, then all that matters is standing up for what you believe in.
Yeah, and that to me says like being who you are. It doesn't matter what other people think. It's not going to matter as long as you are who you are. And I think that's where her strong sense of self is just really powerful, right? And I think that there's a lot to be learned from her as a character, and Kristen Bell breathes so much life and energy into her that it makes me want to go, I want to be stronger. I want to be like to be that self-assured that no matter what situation she's in, she's got it. Because that's all she can do is be her. Exactly.
And, I think of any number of situations that we face in life where it seems like the powers that be are out to get us and there's nothing we can do to change the system we're stuck in. So what do? We do what we do best. Yeah. And, we stand up for what we believe in and fight the good fight. Yeah. Because at the end of the day, that's all that matters is the choices that you make and the actions that you take.
I love that. Fight the good fight, because here she is cutting down the new kid off the flagpole, helping the girl who gets walked all over find her dog, helping everyone, helping and trying to do the best to get where she's going. And she does all of that because she is fighting the good fight because she's resilient. She's trying to find closure. This is the best way she can do that.
Well, she's not doing it because she expects anything from them.
Yeah.
She cuts Wallace down with no expectation that he's going to in any way treat her well or that it's going to come back to her. She does those things because she thinks it's right.
Yeah.
And that's one of the things I really like about her is that she's not doing these things for anyone's social approval or to get back in their good graces.
Yeah.
She does the things that she thinks will be right in her own mind.
Yep.
And then if it ends up causing people to think of her differently, then that's just fine.
Yeah. And she might be keeping people at arm's length and she doesn't need to have social approval of everyone, but she still needs people. She still needs those permanent files from Wallace. She needs the tech help from Mac. So good thing she met her.
Right.
when she needed that assistance. And so I think from these friendships in this first season, you really see that idea of transactions, and I'm really glad you said it in that way because I think that makes a lot of sense in that you might start to see those change a little bit, but maybe not too much.
Yeah.
Right? There's a level of vulnerability, but also I think she, as we've talked about, is very accepting of people. Weevil, Wallace. I mean, Wallace offended the biker gang. She doesn't care.
That's right.
Weevil is that biker gang leader, and that doesn't bother her. And I think that's something that we can learn from Veronica Mars is that maybe not everything should be a transaction, or if our friend has helped us out a lot, maybe we should ask how they're doing. Because I think sometimes she forgets to ask Wallace that.
Yeah,
but at the same time, she's very accepting of people, and I think that is a lot that can be learned about friendship. So I just love this series. I'm so excited for season 4. What do you think is going to happen, or what are you looking forward to for season 4?
Well, I think that season 4 is probably going to somewhat follow the book that was published after the Veronica Mars movie was made. So I've read the book, so I don't want to give away if those are in fact spoilers.
We can bring you back to talk about it after we see in season 4.
That would be very cool. But I expect good things. I think that just because things have heated up with Logan again, that doesn't mean the course of true love will run smoothly because it never does. And I think that she'll continue to explore those relationships and uncover more of Neptune's secrets.
Yeah. And one of the things that I like is that when I was doing the rewatch, they were talking about Neptune as a spring break location, and then that is the situation we're going to find ourselves in season 4. I am looking forward to more Wallace.
Yes.
I love him. And Wallace and Veronica and Mac as a friendship of 3, which will become interesting as we continue to talk about the seasons in the movie, how they become a 2 and a 2 to a group of 3. And I also am always looking forward to Dick Casablancas's shenanigans. And so Ryan Hansen, bring it.
He always does.
He always does.
I think he was born to play this role.
Exactly.
In fact, I've tried to watch him in some other things, and it's like, nope, you're still Dick Casablancas. Absolutely.
And that's okay.
That's
the only role he needs to play, and I'd be happy. So, Lesley, thank you so much for being on.
Thanks for having me here.
Your ability to talk so eloquently about all of these characters and one of our favorite shows. It was just a lot of fun, and so I really appreciate it. You got me thinking about a lot of things that I didn't have noted in my head to talk about, and that's always nice to be able to build together in that conversation. And next week, my friend Meredith will be joining me to talk about season 2 of Veronica Mars. She's a murderino and a marshmallow, also known as a marshmallow-rino. So yes, if you're into both My Favorite Murder, the podcast, and Veronica Mars, be sure to join the crossover group on Facebook so that we can talk about all things Veronica Mars in our group of My Favorite Murderinos. So until next time, friends, consider your snark and who you're keeping at arm's length and maybe what relationships are transactions, but also consider accepting your friends, because without our friends, who would we be? Thanks for listening to Best Forevers. If you like what you hear, be sure to subscribe, rate, review, and of course, share with a friend. Please be sure to follow Best Forevers on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram at Best Forevers Pod, and I'm at Dr. Alysa Lucas on Twitter. You can always find the podcast webpage for more information at bestforeverspod.com and share your stories of friendship by emailing me at bestforeverspod@gmail.com. And if you'd like to support the movement to love on our friends more, check out the podcast on patreon.com/bestforeverspod. Now, friends, check out this recommended podcast that you must get in your ear holes immediately.
Hey Lindsay, are you ever curious about those old books with weird covers in the bargain bins?
Oh my god, yes. Hey Daniel, would you be in a book club where no one reads the whole book?
Funny you ask, 'cause that's our show, 33% Pulp. You, I, and a guest host each read a different third of a pulp novel and then recap the whole thing together.
We start with context, the author, genre, themes, and so on. By the end of the third episode, you'll have heard the main plot, our commentary, and confusion.
And sometimes we have companion episodes with related content from beyond the book with other podcasts. We're 33% Pulp and 100% hopeful you'll join us. Bye!